Some real events are so strange, so dramatic, and so unlikely, that if you saw them in a movie, you would probably say, that would never happen. But every story in this video actually happened. A city was flooded by molasses. A man stole a military ship to escape slavery. A plane landed on a river in the middle of New York. And one group survived in the Andes for 72 days after the world thought they were gone. Welcome to Peak Selects. These are 10 real events that sound like movie scenes. 10. The Great Molasses Flood. In 1919, people in Boston were walking through a normal day. Then they heard a deep rumble. A massive storage tank holding about 2.3 million gallons of molasses suddenly burst open in the city's north end. The tank was around 50 feet tall, and when it failed, a dark wave of sticky molasses rushed through the streets. Buildings were damaged, people were trapped, horses were caught in the flood. And because molasses is thick and heavy, it did not behave like normal water. It sounds like a ridiculous scene from a disaster comedy, but it was not funny. The Great Molasses Flood killed 21 people and injured many more. It became one of the strangest industrial disasters in American history. The insane part is this: people had reportedly noticed problems with the tank before the disaster. But the warning signs were ignored. A city was not destroyed by fire, bombs, or an earthquake. It was hit by a wave of molasses. 9. Robert Smalls steals a Confederate ship. This story sounds like a Hollywood escape scene. In 1862, during the American Civil War, Robert Smalls was enslaved and working on a Confederate transport ship called the Planter. Instead of waiting for freedom, he made a plan. While the white officers were away, Smalls and a small crew took control of the ship. His family and others were hidden on board. Then he sailed through Charleston Harbor, passing Confederate checkpoints. To avoid suspicion, he reportedly used signals and movements the guards expected from the ship's normal crew. One mistake could have ended everything. But Smalls kept going. He guided the ship out of Confederate control and delivered it to Union forces. Imagine the scene: a stolen military ship, a family hidden on board, enemy checkpoints, a nighttime escape, and one man gambling everything on a few minutes of perfect timing. Except this was not fiction. Robert Smalls escaped slavery, helped the Union, and later became a politician. That is not just a movie scene. That is a real escape. 8. The flight attendant who survived a fall from the sky. On January 26, 1972, a plane exploded in midair over Czechoslovakia. Almost everyone on board died. But one flight attendant, Vesna Vulovic, survived. According to Guinness World Records, she survived a fall of 10,160 meters without a parachute. That is over 33,000 feet. In a movie, people would call that unrealistic. A plane breaks apart in the sky. A person falls from cruising altitude. And somehow, against almost every possible expectation, she lives. Her survival was not painless or simple. She suffered severe injuries and had a long recovery. But the fact remains, she fell from the sky without a parachute and survived. There are survival stories, and then there are stories that sound like they should not even be physically possible. This is one of them. 7. The battle where Americans and Germans fought on the same side. Near the end of World War II, one of the strangest battles of the entire war happened at Castleliter in Austria. Inside the castle were high-profile French prisoners. Outside the castle, Waffen-SS forces were approaching. Then something happened that sounds impossible. American soldiers, German Wehrmacht soldiers, Austrian resistance fighters, and French prisoners fought on the same side against the SS. History Channel UK describes Castleliter as the only recorded case of Wehrmacht soldiers fighting alongside the American army during World War II. Think about that. A castle, prisoners inside, enemies becoming temporary allies. A final battle in the last days of the war. If this were written as a movie script, people would probably say it was too convenient. But it happened, and that is what makes this story so strange. World War II was ending. Germany was collapsing, but at Castleliter, the lines became bizarrely complicated. For one battle, people who should have been enemies stood on the same side of the walls. 6. The plane that landed on the Hudson River. On January 15, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York. Minutes later, the aircraft struck a flock of birds. The plane lost almost all thrust in both engines. There was no normal runway option. So Captain Chesley, Sully, Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skills made a decision that sounds like a movie climax. They landed the Airbus A320 on the Hudson River. The National Transportation Safety Board says the aircraft lost thrust after encountering birds and ditched in the Hudson River about 8.5 miles from LaGuardia. The 150 passengers and 5 crew members evacuated through the exits. No one died. Imagine being a passenger. One moment, you are on a normal flight. Minutes later, the plane is gliding lower and lower over New York City. Then you hear the impact. Water surrounds the aircraft. Ferries rush toward the scene. It became known as the Miracle on the Hudson. But the real reason it worked was not magic. It was training, timing, decision-making, and calm under pressure. That is why this event still feels unreal. Not because it was impossible, because everything had to go right in the worst possible situation. 5. The Thai Cave Rescue. In 2018, 12 boys from a Thai soccer team and their coach entered the Tham Luang Nang Non cave in northern Thailand. Then heavy rain flooded parts of the cave system. They were trapped. For 9 days, nobody knew if they were alive. The Australian government's crisis account states that the team entered the cave on June 23, 2018, and were not seen for 9 days. Then divers found them alive. But finding them was not the end. The cave was flooded. The passages were narrow. The route was dangerous even for expert divers. Getting children out through that underwater maze sounded almost impossible. The rescue became a global operation. Divers, engineers, soldiers, volunteers, and medical experts all worked under extreme pressure. One wrong move could have killed the boys, the coach, or the rescuers. But over several days, they were brought out. All 12 boys and their coach survived. This is the kind of story that feels like a thriller, a team trapped underground. Rising water, no simple exit, a rescue plan that sounds too risky to try, and the whole world watching. But it was real. 4. Operation Mincemeat. During World War II, British intelligence wanted to fool Germany about where the Allies would invade next. So they created one of the strangest deception plans in military history. They used a dead body, dressed it as a fictional officer, planted fake documents on it, and allowed it to wash up near Spain. The goal was to make the Germans believe the Allies planned to invade Greece and Sardinia instead of Sicily. The Imperial War Museums describes Operation Mincemeat as a British deception intended to hide the true target of the Allied invasion of Sicily. This sounds like a spy movie. A fake identity, secret documents, a corpse carrying false information, enemy intelligence taking the bait. But it was real. The plan worked well enough to become one of the most famous deception operations of the war. It is hard to believe because it feels too strange. Not a codebreaker, not a hidden radio, not a secret tunnel. A fake dead officer helped mislead Nazi Germany. Sometimes history does not need writers. It is already absurd enough. 3. Apollo 13. Apollo 13 was supposed to land on the moon. Instead, it became a survival mission in space. In April 1970, an oxygen tank exploded while the spacecraft was on its way to the moon. The moon landing had to be abandoned. Now the mission was simple: bring the astronauts home alive. NASA describes Apollo 13 as the successful failure. The crew used the lunar module as a lifeboat and returned safely to Earth, splashing down in the Pacific on April 17, 1970. Think about the situation. You are far from Earth. Something explodes in your spacecraft. Your original mission is gone. Your power, oxygen, and survival systems are limited. And thousands of people on Earth are trying to solve problems in real time. This is not just dramatic. It is terrifying. Every calculation mattered. Every decision mattered. Apollo 13 did not land on the moon. But the crew survived one of the most dangerous emergencies in spaceflight history. That is why this story is still remembered. It was a failed landing, but a successful rescue. 2. Shackleton's Endurance Expedition. In 1914, Ernest Shackleton and his crew set out to cross Antarctica. They never even reached the continent. Their ship, the Endurance, became trapped in pack ice. Then the ice crushed it. The crew was stranded in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Royal Museums Greenwich described Shackleton's famous 1914 Endurance Expedition as the journey where he undertook to save his crew from death. National Geographic notes that all 28 people survived the ordeal. No rescue helicopter, no GPS, no modern satellite phone, just ice, cold, darkness, and distance. After the ship was destroyed, the men survived on ice floes, reached Elephant Island, and then Shackleton and a small group crossed brutal seas in a lifeboat to find help. This sounds like an exaggerated survival epic. A ship crushed by ice. Men trapped at the bottom of the world. A desperate ocean journey. A rescue attempt with almost no margin for error. But it happened. And the most unbelievable part is this: every member of the expedition survived. For a survival story, that is almost impossible to believe. 1. The Andes plane crash survival. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed in the Andes. There were 45 people on board. The crash left survivors trapped in freezing mountains, far from help. National Geographic reports that after 72 days, only 16 survived. This story is difficult, brutal, and not something to romanticize. The survivors faced cold, hunger, injury, isolation, and the belief that nobody was coming. Search efforts were eventually called off. To the outside world, they were gone. But they were not. After weeks in the mountains, survivors Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa began a desperate journey to find help. No proper climbing gear, no clear route, no guarantee that anyone would be on the other side. They walked out of a place where survival already seemed impossible. And because of that, the remaining survivors were rescued. This is number 1 because it contains almost every element of a movie: a plane crash, a remote mountain range, no rescue, impossible decisions, a desperate escape, and a final rescue after the world had given up. But unlike a movie, nobody wrote this for drama. It happened to real people. And that is what makes it unforgettable. These events sound fake because they are too extreme for normal life. But history is full of moments where reality becomes stranger than fiction. A river landing, a stolen ship, a castle battle, a rescue inside a flooded cave, a survival story in the Andes. None of them were movie scenes. They were real. Thanks for watching Peak Selects. Subscribe for more.